Okay, our new project is going to be an orb. What's the first thing you guys have to do when you get your clay? Good. Orbs. My definition of an orb is a hollow form. This new project has a theme. Nick. That theme is going to be food and health-related things. So give me some examples of some things you could make out of clay that are food.
Carrots.
Apple, carrots, bananas. What else? Pizza, cheeseburger. Good. What about health-related things?
A heart.
A heart. What else?
A lung.
A lung.
A liver.
Bicycle.
A bicycle. What? A nail polish bottle.
Maybe a sneaker.
It's health-related. Find that in the drugstore.
Walgreens logo.
Okay, cool. I'm going to make a cheeseburger today. So the first thing you guys are going to do when you get your clay is wedge it, and then you're going to form it into the general shape of what you're making. I'm making a cheeseburger. Okay? So I've got my little cheeseburger here. Actually, it's kind of a big cheeseburger. The next step, once you get your shape, is going to be to cut it in half. Okay, because we can't fire anything that's any thicker than what?
1/4. Half.
With your pinky finger, 1/4 inch. So I'm going to cut this in half. Try to cut this line as straight as you can. You don't want a super jagged cut because it's going to be harder to put back together later. Okay? The next step is going to be to hollow out both sides of your project. Again, your walls can't be any thicker than 1/4 inch. I'm going to go kind of quickly at this, but you're going to want to take your time. When you're working with loop tools, it's very easy to make your clay too thin. Once you get all that clay carved out of there, you're going to take the time to smooth out the inside. Just quick with your finger. Trying not to disrupt that outside shape that you made so that it goes back together nice. Same thing with the other side. Now, because you guys are working with a hollow form and you're going to have to turn it into something, it's really easy to crush something that's hollow, right? Especially if you're adding and slipping and scoring and smoothing out the outside surface. So what we're going to do to make your life a little easier is we're going to stuff these with newspaper. You'll find newspaper in the back room underneath one of the tables in a big blue bin. I like newspaper because it's a little stiffer than paper towels, so it holds its shape better. Okay, you're going to stuff both sides nice and full. All right, what do you do when you have to put two pieces of clay together? Slip and score. When you're scoring, how many different directions should you go? At least 2. Don't be afraid to carve too deep. So I'm going to score and slip this together. Again, I'm not being very careful here. Now, what am I making here? Essentially a giant air bubble. And a cheeseburger. Because I'm making this an air bubble, you're going to have to make sure that you puncture the surface at some point closer to the end. Can't forget my slip. Okay, slipping and scoring. Will you roll out a coil for me with that stuff? Okay. Now remember when we put together our slab pots, in order to make them stronger and that connection a little bit better and neater, we used a coil. You're going to do the same thing here. After you put your shapes back together, you're going to put a coil around them so that you kind of hide that incision or that joining of the clay. So put it back together best you can. Okay, and then you're going to roll out a coil quick. I got it. This is a thin one. And you're going to smooth that coil into both surfaces. So I'm going to take my coil, I'm going to put it around that little incision where I slipped and scored those two things together. And I'm going to smooth it into both surfaces, one side and the other, to make sure you're covering up that crack, because otherwise your pot has a chance to fall apart, number one. And number two, you're going to see that crack there the whole time too. Okay? Once you get this all put together, you're going to want to take the time to smooth out your project. The reason you take the time to smooth it out now is because after you put on all the fine detail, you don't want to have to go around and smooth around things. It's easier to do it from the very beginning, and it doesn't take very long. Use your finger, and then I would go back with the damp sponge. Okay, now I'm making this a cheeseburger. So let's think about what's on a cheeseburger.
A bun.
Lettuce.
A bun, lettuce,
Burger. Cheese.
cheese,
Tomatoes.
tomatoes, meat. Okay, I'm going to put the meat on first. Now, I think that when I eat a cheeseburger, the meat's always just a little bit smaller than the bun, right? So kind of right in the middle, I'm going to take out a section where the meat's going to be. And I'm not going to do this whole thing all the way around, just one side so you guys can see. All right? But the meat has its own kind of texture to it. It's like bumpy and pulley all at the same time. So I'm just going to take a pencil and make some dots in my clay here. But now it looks a lot like dots and not a lot like meat. So I'm actually going to take my finger and push them down a little bit. Go back in and do the same thing one more time to kind of yuck up that surface. Again, smooth it out a little bit. There. Looks kind of like a little meat patty in there, doesn't it? Cheese. Little triangles on all four sides coming out of the burger, right? You don't really see much more of it because it melts to the meat, but cut a little triangle. The cheese always goes on top of the meat, right? I would be slipping and scoring this on there. Little piece of lettuce, maybe. Take it, make it nice and flat and thin, almost to the point where it starts to crack on you at the edge. Then I'm gonna twist it and yuck it up so that it looks like a folded piece of lettuce. I would put this all the way around, but I think maybe I'm just gonna do it right here on top of my little piece of cheese. Okay, so I've got like a little thin piece of lettuce here. I've got my triangle piece of cheese. I got my meat. Do you guys see how this is kind of starting to turn into a cheeseburger now?
Yeah, show me that one side again.
Yeah, looks like a cheeseburger. Okay, after you get yours looking how you want it, whatever you decide to make, your health or food related object, the last thing you have to do is poke a hole in the bottom. Now, we made a giant air bubble, which is a problem. It's not a problem if you give that air a place to escape. Okay, so I poked a hole in it. A pencil, any tool would work for this job. You want it to be a smaller hole. You don't want to make the whole bottom, a big empty hole, but the newspaper on the inside is just going to burn and turn to ash, so you don't have to worry about that. And so long as that hole that you made goes all the way through to the center hollow part, so long as whatever you're poking in there touches your newspaper, you'll be all right. Okay? So these are orbs. You're going to make a health or food related object, make the general shape, cut it in half, hollow it out, fill it with newspaper, slip and score it back together, use a coil to kind of hide where you cut it, right? Smooth it into both surfaces. Smooth out the whole thing and then start turning it into what you want. Strawberries have seeds, right? So you're not just going to make the shape of a strawberry and put a leaf on it and call it a day. You're not just going to make a piece of cake that doesn't have the texture of a piece of cake, right? No, health or food.
Oh, so any kind of food you want.
Any kind of food or any kind of health-related object. An apple. Here's an apple. Golden apple. Okay, you can cut that.